Ruby Amethyst family, we need to talk about how the deck is so back. You may remember a few months ago before DLC Seattle, I spoke with some of the best and most prominent Ruby Amethyst players in the world to discuss the resurgence of Emerald Steel and how we could combat that and come back strong in that meta. Right now, we are in a pretty similar situation where pretty much everybody in the game is down on Ruby Amethyst. Nobody is talking about it that much, and the deck honestly hadn't received a bunch of support in Arcasia's Island. But there are still some great players out there who are loyal to the color combination and still believe in it, even despite its current place within the meta, which is definitely at its lowest point ever in the history of the game. The first player we're going to be talking to is, of course, Ed. Everybody knows Ed. He is one of the godfathers of Ruby Amethyst. He won a Disney Lorcana challenge with Ruby Amethyst, and he also won the Continental Championship for North America with Ruby Amethyst. Ed is a pioneer of the deck list, an amazing deck builder, and somebody that the community always looks to for advice when things seem bleak. We're also going to be talking to Lux Ferrante, who was on my last two videos about Ruby Amethyst. He is one of the deck builders and playtesters for Luxury Gaming, and he's been on Ruby Amethyst since day one. He is an amazing innovator that helped create the Ruby Amethyst burn deck that won a Golden Mickey in Seattle and is still on Ruby Amethyst, and you are going to absolutely love the two deck lists that Luxury has been working on. I'm also going to talk to Taris, who has been blowing up social media and really pioneering a new style of Ruby Amethyst, that being a location-heavy deck with things like Fairy Ship and Forbidden Mountain. And I'm also going to be talking to the Lorcana villain himself. Baker is an amazing caster, and everybody knows he has a beautiful voice and a keen mind for the game, but he is a great player in his own right. He was the first ever set champion, and I mean that literally, the first ever person to win a set championship in Disney Lorcana, and he did it with Ruby Amethyst. He is still on the list, and I want to pick his brain to see what he has to say about his favorite color combination. So with all that being said, what's the current state of Ruby Amethyst? Okay, so Ruby Amethyst was seemingly DOA after all the cards were revealed from Arcasia's Island. I mean, the vibes in the 20 Lore Pro Discord were never lower than they were at the beginning of this set. I don't think anyone was excited about the Amethyst cards for Ruby Amethyst. No one was excited about the Ruby cards, and definitely no one was excited about the Ruby Amethyst Dual Ink cards. So were you like everybody else? Did you think that the deck had been basically power crept into oblivion by the crazy amount of support that Sapphire had gotten at the beginning of the set?
Yes, as of late, we have been power crept out, but I don't think that it means that the deck in general has been power crept out, because I think that since Rise of the Floodborn, we've already had some of the most overwhelmingly best cards in the game that were just so much above pretty much anything else in the game, at least as an engine, like as a core purple engine to work together, like the Foxes and the Merlins. That is still one of the most powerful things you can do in the game. And because we've had it for so long, we haven't really gained any new toys. I think it's easy to feel like we've been power crept out and that we've been left behind, because we haven't had a lot really that competes with these incredible cards that we've had for so long. You would make the argument that the last sort of big change that was made was Flynn. I think Flynn is half dead in set 7. We can maybe get to that later, but I still play a couple of copies of the 3-drop Sisu just because she's so well static, Quest for 2.
Everybody that plays Ruby Amethyst has kind of just waited and sit back to kind of see, okay, what new tools do we get? And so every time we get a reveal, you know, we're at the edge of our seat, and then maybe we're like, okay, that falls like a little bit too short. So it feels like we got super spoiled at the beginning, and since then, it's really kind of dipped it down in power level. But yeah, I can't lie. I think everybody, especially at the beginning of this set, fell into kind of like that doom and gloom moment where we're like, oh no, these other colors might be getting too far ahead of us.
Everyone else that played this deck, we were sitting there watching all the cards be released, and we're like, "Where's the love? Like, where's the card that's gonna make us go, oh yeah, this is the card we've been waiting for." Like red purple. Like I know it's been a few sets, but it seems like we just keep getting like one card filler thrown in, maybe if that.
I think it makes sense that when a deck doesn't get any new cards and like other colors like Sapphire got a ton of new cards, it makes sense that everyone's higher on those colors.
It was natural for everybody to kind of have that response at the beginning, and even just like at the beginning of play testing too, just kind of seeing the power that these other decks were really getting a hold of.
It is possible to come back into the format, specifically now that I think people have figured out, red blue has a good chance into like the Sapphire Steel decks. And I think, historically speaking, red purple is still very good into red blue. So I would say if red blue becomes popular, I think red purple has a good chance to make a comeback.
I did have my doubts that the deck was going to kind of like fall off, but that's what normally red purple does time and time again at the beginning of metas or formats. It falls off because we don't really know our place in the meta. Like we can always answer and adjust to whatever's going on in the meta, but we have to know what the meta is in order to do that.
Concerning that specific question of like, do I feel like it's been power crept out by other things? No, it's just not been a fair balance of when things hit a certain threshold of power.
Okay, so I feel like in the last set, there were pretty similar vibes going into it. Maybe not in the way that, okay, Sapphire is obviously insane because they just got 3 incredibly powerful cards, but the same in the sense that Ruby Amethyst players felt like they didn't get much. So we were kind of down on the deck, but then in that format where it was extremely competitive, and I would say that there were a ton of bad matchups or difficult matchups, not any really, really easy ones. Like Diggy Diggy Hole was tough, Emerald Amethyst was tough, Amber Steel Song was tough, things like this. And despite all of that, Ruby Amethyst was able to come out on top, not just in Europe, but in North America as well, win both continental championships. Why do you think the deck performed so well in the last format, despite us not feeling so great going into it?
Be prepared.
Okay.
I genuinely think is such a big part of it. Now, don't get me wrong. Obviously, Ruby Sapphire, like other Ruby decks, can use that. Ruby Sapphire can use it, and we've seen to great success. But again, it goes back to what we were saying. The bounce engine in and of itself is so incredibly powerful. We've seen so many decks benefit from it. EA Tempo, Amethyst Steel, because just that core purple engine is just so good. And then when you combine with Ruby's removal cards, Be Prepared is the main character. But even just to look at things like Brawl, since we've had that, this is one of like the most reliable answers in the game to some of the most must-answer characters.
Our game plan rarely ever changes. Like our game plan is the same thing. Like we want to like get lore in when we can, stick our locations on empty boards, nuke the boards and get value when we can with Be Prepared, and then goat bounce goat for game at the end of games. And that hasn't changed over the last 4 formats. That's always been the way the deck plays.
So kind of looking back to those formats, Ruby Sapphire definitely was the, touted as the premier deck of the format. And I think Ruby Amethyst is definitely the best like pocket pick deck if Ruby Sapphire becomes very popular. So I think what happened was a lot of these like steel based decks just had too hard of a time dealing with Ruby Sapphire. So they kind of got pushed out of the format. Like, for example, like Amber Steel and Sapphire Steel, like the, 6/6 and previous versions of it were historically very good into Ruby Amethyst. I think all my losses at all the DLCs were all to like either Amber Steel or to Sapphire Steel. And I think because Ruby Sapphire became popular, those decks can't really exist because like you saw in like the NA Continentals, it was over 30% of the field. Yeah. So naturally that kind of got kicked out, and like Ruby Amethyst became a little bit more popular.
With Europe, it was the beginning of set 6. So like nobody really knew what the format was, and it was like the beginning of the Genie Wars.
I was actually quite surprised though that no other Ruby Amethyst decks kind of made it to the top 16. One of the reasons might be because of the popularity of like Genie in those decks. And historically, like Ruby Sapphire was really good against Genie. Like usually most like you just get it popped and usually don't get any value from it. And Rabbit became the premier draw engine again because Ruby Sapphire actually has a really hard time dealing with it because it's kind of protected in your hand, right? So I think all in all, it kind of makes sense that Ruby Amethyst can rise up again if Ruby Sapphire becomes popular.
During last set really just came down to the people behind the deck. I think it was the players themselves more so than the deck itself. And I think what we saw were players that were very committed to the deck for a long time, really understood it in and out. And I think what Red Purple did last set was make everybody that thought they understood how to play it, thought that they understood the matchups, really have to come to grips with, oh, maybe I was just getting carried by the deck, actually, rather than it being the other way around. And the people that did so well were the people that actually were just very solid players and understood the game and all the matchups in and out enough to use the just baseline consistency of Ruby Amethyst to kind of be able to persevere through all of these decks that are fundamentally stronger and do stronger things, but are built on a lot of high roll lines and moments compared to Ruby Amethyst, where it's like, I'm just going to play curve, I'm going to play very well, and just understand the moments when I need to play off curve, and I only know those because of my experience.
Ed adapted his list and was like, I'm going to play locations. And he was like, oh, my crabs and my 12 1-drops are like early pressure and will get me there to the middle late game where my deck's going to keep doing what it normally does anyway, remove things and just poke in and get lore.
Just the bounce engine and Ruby's removal are just two of over. If you put these together, they're just some of the best synergy you could possibly hope for in the game. And it has access to certain things that other decks just can't do. Like Ruby Sapphire doesn't really run Tremaine. Like some builds have, but it's not a common card you would see in Ruby Sapphire. And Ruby Sapphire is one of your best removal cards for, as long as it's the only thing on the board, anything. So I just think the way Ruby Amethyst was able to build itself and the cards it could play are just some of the most powerful things in the game. And again, it goes back to how I started, be prepared. I think that it is the best comeback mechanic in the game. But not only that, it's the psychology of it, right? As soon as your opponent knows that you have access to be prepared, it completely changes the psychology of how they're allowed to play the game. So just having that in your deck forces your opponent to play in a certain way. And again, bounce engine, I know I've said it multiple times, but it is that good. Like having a rabbit sing friends and then bounce it back to your hand is one of the most powerful things you can do in the game, which I took that quote from Ed.
So at the beginning of this set, let's go back to Arcasia's Island. It felt like Sapphire Steel just being Sapphire Steel, having the removal, having the turn 1 bell, having the new Tamatoa, all of this just completely pushed Ruby Amethyst out of the conversation, out of the meta, right from the beginning. But with Ruby Sapphire now performing very, very well at the Charlie's Collectible Show tournament, the 13K that they had, do you think that Ruby Amethyst now has a way to get back in the meta and become a respected deck within the meta again because how well the deck has historically done against Ruby Sapphire?
Yeah, most definitely. Anytime there's a meta where red-blue gets to kind of sit on top, it just means that Ruby Amethyst is just kind of sitting back in the shadows, kind of feasting on that and gets to kind of steal, pop out and steal the wins from time to time. So it's definitely good for us with red-blue being, number one.
I mentioned earlier that we're like Flynn is half dead. There is an argument that Flynn could end up coming back. It's super hard to justify at the moment with Bell. Like before, we had Cinderella, Ballroom Sensation, but now we've got so many decks running Bell. It's not a reliable enough of a card. But when you see these Ruby Sapphire lists that now don't even ramp on 2 and they just play Coil, I just find myself thinking, man, Flynn Ryder would be having the time of his life on the board right now. Okay, like that was often your win condition with Ruby Sapphire anyway, right? Like even if they high rolled and they got everything they wanted, just that early 3 or 6 lore that Flynn got at the beginning of the game, even if they then high rolled, was enough to hopefully then get you over the line.
So I do play a lot of Ruby Sapphire as well, and I think one of the main things I wanted to try to see if it would work is the Bell in Ruby Sapphire. But the issue is definitely that everyone that plays the deck runs into is that they don't have like the 5 through 8 popsicle and Fortisphere that Steel has. So a lot of the time you're going to be, playing some like unconventional tool or Vitalisphere, Ice Block kind of thing. And like the Bell's going to eat up a ton of your resources. And Ruby Sapphire is like a really resource heavy deck. So I think because of that, they don't really have that many options to kind of fight the early game. So I think cards like Flynn will actually be good again. Because if you think about like what can Ruby Sapphire do against Flynn if they're not playing Bell? Like the earliest they can block it is still like, if they play the item version with like Scrooge or like the original version with Grandma, it still will take a while for them to kind of fight the Flynn back. So I can totally see a world where Flynn makes a comeback if the Sapphire Steel becomes a little bit less popular.
Well, the Sapphire Steel decks, as a Ruby Amethyst player, I am much more scared of the Sapphire Steel decks that are running Dime.
I think a lot of people just jumped on the early bandwagon. I mean, obviously the cards are broken. The new Tamatoa and like the card, any TCG, any card that says play something for free will always be insane or broken.
Tamatoa 6-drop is so incredibly strong that we're seeing so many blue steel decks that aren't even running the dimes, aren't even running the big 8-cost Tamatoa. They're this more mid-range build of the deck, maybe like a Kiwi build or something like what Artabax has begun to popularize with the Talas and the Zeuses, so you have a bit more control. If they don't have dime, I'm quite happy to pair into blue steel as a Ruby Amethyst player. I'm not saying like it's not like, oh, this is a free win, not by any means. But I think I'm not for 1 second am I going to go, oh, this is a bad matchup if I know you don't have dime. Because again, I think some of the rules are still the same. So many of their characters are the big bulky guys that Tamatoa is just going to feast on. If you can get rid of the smaller characters in the early game, which Ruby Amethyst early game is pretty good. Like Merlin Crab is like Fox is obviously great, but Crab with Diablos, like just firing off these 3 strength cannons that then draw you a card, and your Crab is still on the board. So I think Ruby Amethyst can handle that early game quite well, and then we've got goats and stuff to fall back on in the late game. So blue steel decks that aren't running dime, bring it on. I'll take you on all day.
Blue steel is very tough, but I think that's why, I kind of had to figure out a way for some type of adaptation to like give us a line that could maybe give us an edge against blue steel, because most definitely at the beginning of play testing we were doing a lot of like red, purple, blue steel, or just testing out all the different kind of blue steel builds. And yeah, for a moment it felt like, man, I guess red purple is unplayable, but thankfully for some reason a good little fairy ship decided to come into my brain and gave us something to work with. But yeah, I mean, seeing red blue do amazing means that we definitely have our own spot.
So I think obviously the deck is very powerful, and it flooded the first big tournament we seen, and we kind of knew that that was going to be the meta. But then red blue did a great job of adjusting their list and kind of like showing, okay, we're still kind of like the top dog of the format, kind of, because Coil is Coil, and we don't need to talk about that card because that card just speaks for itself.
It's that constant rock, paper, scissors, right? But yeah, To answer your original question, Ruby Sapphire specifically, if there's a lot more of it, then yeah, Ruby Amethyst will definitely take advantage of that. And if there's enough, then it maybe beckons the conversation of, okay, well, can we warrant Flynn again?
So despite all of the Sapphire Steel being everywhere and being admittedly a pretty tough matchup for traditional Ruby Amethyst, the locations list has seemingly brought it back to life. A bunch of good performances recently, making top cuts and winning tournaments. Do you think that this version of the deck is a long-term strategy for Ruby Amethyst players, or do you think it's just an adaptation of the deck to battle against the current meta and will eventually need to change again back to a more traditional list?
That's a good question. I think what happened was a lot of people ended up kind of disrespecting locations. I knew some Ruby Sapphire players that ended up cutting Maui, and that was kind of like the best anti-location like card that they had in their deck. So it made sense that, if location hate was down, and it would make sense that the card would be like the locations would become good again.
If blue steel is going away from, kind of the uber, item shenanigans that, Zan and them kind of put together, I think, and if blue steel has to slow down a little bit and kind of be less like full force on the OTK, I think it gives Ruby Amethyst a little bit more room to split off and maybe go have like the route that I was working on and that we've been seeing with the locations, but also back to the like traditional route. Because traditional could do well against red blue already. And I think it can still do very well against red blue now, but it was just we just auto lose to the blue steel. But if blue steel slows down and has to kind of adjust its ways, we might be able to find a way back to the traditional.
I can absolutely see why it's doing well, right? If we're living in a world of turn one Bell to sit there and threaten a storm, then playing Fairy Ship on one is pretty good. Like, not only are you not providing a target for storm, but it's going to tick away. You might have a guaranteed amount of lore. Maybe they miss Bell, and that's even more. And maybe even if they can deal with it within a turn or two, at least that's a couple of times they're not questing. And again, the great thing about locations has always been like they're so strong after board wipes, right? If your opponent B preps, and like we remember back in like when locations first came out, like if they play B prep and you can go double castle, that was just game winning in so many situations. And Queen's Castle is not current at the moment, unfortunately. 7 willpower on a location that doesn't trigger draw until the start of your next turn is a bit too slow. At least Library, the 8 willpower is a little trickier to hit, and you can preemptively trigger the ability to draw, right? You can put down a broom, move it to the location, play a card, and then draw 2 from the magic broom, and that's pretty good in other situations. So we know that locations can be good at the right time.
I do believe the deck it performs well, and I think it can be a viable way to play the deck. But then there's also the aspect of the other decks are going to adjust the same way that we do. Like, you'll probably see the blue decks play the 6-drop Cusco like we saw at the CCS this past weekend. We saw a few of lists playing the Cusco. We might see more hideaways in lists because of the dime. If blue decks are starting to play 2 Cuscos, 2 hideaways, the location version might not be as viable if people are adding removal for those problematic cards for them normally.
My problem with the location deck is only in that I think if more traditional stock builds of Ruby Amethyst do start to become more popular, I think those versions of Ruby Amethyst that have access to Crab, Fox, and Maui, I think that's a bad matchup for these location-heavy Ruby Amethyst matchups in general. I'm sure there are like a good enough player that knows when to play the locations. I think could still do well get into a stock build, but it is like it's hard to find the right time to play these locations against traditional Ruby Amethyst, right? Even a turn 1 Fairy Ship, like it's just going to be prey for a Fox. If you're able to get down a broom, then the Crab is able to easily deal with it. The Forbidden Mountain is easily removed by a Maui, and I'm on like 3 Maui and 4 Crab as well. So like I prey on blue players at the moment that wait for the B prep and then they go mana, and then I just go Maui Crab, bang.
I personally don't like the location playstyle, specifically the Forbidden Mountain and the Fairy Ship. I think they don't provide enough value for me. Like, the way I like to play the game is like through value, and I like the library not for the lore it produces, but mostly for like the card draw that it generates. So like, in the article I wrote, I mostly care that in the mid to like late game, I want to be able to draw as many cards as possible from the library. And like the library's lore is kind of just like byproduct of that card. Like eventually you'll be able to grind your opponent away. And that's how I kind of want to win. I did watch some of the CCS with Zeke, piloting the Forbidden Mountain and Fairy Ship version of the deck. And I saw that you just like kind of run those cards out and you kind of have to pray that your opponent doesn't have any answers to it.
Mm-hmm.
And when they don't, it's insane, right? It's really good.
Yeah.
But when they do, you basically just lose the game. You're out of juice and then like, well, I can't get to the rest of the way there. And personally, like that's a little bit too high variance for me. So like I don't think I would personally do it, but I can see the appeal of like style of the deck. Yeah.
Like, hey, anyone that's can find a slightly different version of red purple and do well with it is okay in my book. I'm absolutely on your team. I want to see you succeed. Reality is, I think it's doing well at the moment because of the amount of people that were on the blue decks. And I think these locations can really punish them, especially the blue steel decks that don't have Maui.
Mm-hmm.
And even the blue-red decks, like they might have 3 or 4 copies of Maui, but they've got to get to that turn, right? If you drop turn 1 Fairy Ship and their curve is Porp into Saudi Azure Sea or into Coil or into Small Sisu or something, then they're not touching this Fairy Ship and then maybe this Forbidden Mountain for a while. So I can see why this deck is doing well. It's great to see a location-heavy build doing well. I think traditional Ruby Amethyst will feast on it.
We are at a point now where you could easily run both versions, and I think the only time that I would suggest not, playing the location version is if we're seeing a room, like if you're in a room that's like 30% red purple, but we're most likely not going to run into that. And so these locations are still very tricky for every other deck, whereas like if it's a bunch of red purple around, that's the reason why this strategy didn't have a place before, but it has a place now.
Follow-up question in a similar vein. Do you think things like the Queen's Castle could make a return if Ruby Sapphire is cutting Maui, or do you think they'll just put Maui back in?
I talked about Queen's Castle before that it is a little bit more vulnerable to just getting picked off versus like the library is you can always get value from it because you can always just attach and like start ramming things or popping things immediately. Queen's Castle, it could make a comeback. It still like generates some kind of value, right? If it doesn't go answered. And I think that's the main differentiator between that card and like Fairy Ship and Forbidden Mountain. Like those cards are just strictly for gaining lore. A Queen's Castle can actually kind of generate use and value. So I could totally see like both of them coming back. And if I were to run like a location heavy list, I would lean like towards library and castle instead of like trying to touch like Fairy Ship or Forbidden Mountain.
So you've obviously been building your list, and I think that there are Ruby Amethyst players all across the world trying to make things work, trying to make their favorite deck bring them wins yet again. So with all that in mind, you being a great deck builder, what are some cards that you would recommend or some cards you think deserve more consideration?
I've been playing kind of this like wonky list. I've been playing a bunch of evasive stuff, and just low to the ground, kind of like just put everything on the board and just have people deal with it. So kind of like an aggro list, but it still has some type of defense with like brawls and Maui, and crabs and stuff. The deck that I was doing so well with, it's actually like a $50 special deck, is they can't answer everything. Like they can't strength everything, they can't Zeus everything, they can't answer everything every single turn. And if they waste like a strength or a storm on your Diablo or your Pascal on turn 1, then like it's opening up your other cards later in the game. People need to try new stuff. Now, I'm not a fan of the new Queen of Hearts, the red one. I've actually been playing the 1/3 Ursula. I just feel like it trades better into the 3/3 bodies. And also if like against the random Rapunzel matchups, if it stays on the board, it's still only a one attack character. So they don't heal and draw for 3. If you go like like I said, if you go like Pascal into double 1-drop into Minnie Mouse Surfer into Genie, if they're just like drawing cards and not doing anything to your board, you're just gonna win the game. And that's the kind of like approach I was taking. And then like if they have to hard cast the Zeus to kill your Genie instead of singing it, then that's their turn 4, and then like you play another threat.
And I think about certain cards that in the past have been very good and I think are just kind of still overlooked. Cusco's always been a card for me that I feel like has been very overlooked. You know, if there's a lot of red blue around, then any card that helps you be more aggressive but replaces itself is always better. I think even LeFou is the underrated 2-drop card that I see people trying to combo it with the queen and such like that and listen that may be something that could be done. But I think LeFou, even in an aggressive strategy, helps a lot. You can protect your characters, double challenge, do all sorts of stuff.
I think two come to mind really. One of them being B King. There was a point in time where you would see it quite a lot, but it's been a while since it's been, shall we say, staple. So this was born from seeing the amount of lists that were back on Fishbone Quill that just wanted to ramp into turn 4 Shark or turn 4 Tamatoa. Because they're never going to expect you to have the B King if no one's playing enough of them. If they feel like they're safe from the Tremaine for a couple of turns, then that incentivizes them to do so. So much so that they may not even care about sticking a second character on the board beforehand. And the only turns they've got to do that are turn 2, right? Because on turn 1 they Porpsicle. Right. Turn 2 it would have to be a T-Po if they want a Fishbone on 3, and then on 4 ramp up to a 6-drop. So if they don't T-Po, there's no other character on board. So being able to, they might overplay their hand into that, saying, right, I'm getting out this Shark or Tamatoa. I know you're not going to be able to touch it for a couple of turns, not by stock lists. Hit him with that B King, it just ends the game on the spot. Not to mention, if there is protection for the Tremaine effect, if you go into a turn 6 with a 4-cost Singer, and you're able to sing the B King, make them pop off the bell or the T-Po or whatever, and then play the Tremaine. That can be a big tempo swing. I've played a lot with this deck. I still stand behind the B Kings. I could see them coming out, and just because I'm on 2 Tremaines, 2 B Kings, I could see them coming out and going back to just 3 Tremaine potentially being enough. Only really because I haven't seen as much Shark about lately. There's again, CCS, Ruby Sapphire did very well, so maybe we see a resurgence all of a sudden. But I've not seen it a lot so far. But if it does end up being a lot out there, and there's a lot more Ruby Sapphire, then I think I would stand behind the B Kings. They've been super good for me.
The ladies will probably be good again. I think the problem before was we thought that there was a lot of unfair things you could do that were better than just play a card, banish a card. But I think the format has gotten to the point where it's people are playing a lot of these random do nothing cards for example Pete, for example, the big Pete.
Yeah,
yes, he can stop your opponent from saying things, but ultimately he's kind of just a 5/5, right? Mm-hmm. Some people are playing Miss Bianca, and some people are just missing with Scrooge, right? They're playing Scrooge with low item count, and then you just miss and it's a 4/4 dummy, right?
Yeah.
So if people are playing a lot of these kind of dummy cards that don't really do anything, I think Tremaine and Medusa will definitely make a comeback back into the format. And they still kind of present a win condition on their own, right? It's very similar to me to the library. The good part of the card is, yes, it can banish one of your opponent's cards, but also you can turn it sideways and win with the card, right?
Right.
So I think those cards will probably make a comeback if there's a lot of these kind of do nothing cards in the format. And I do predict that those cards will come back.
I'm pretty sold on the Queen of Hearts. I'm only at a 2 count, and I do think it's wrong to run too many because it's a super bad top deck. Yeah. I think Queen of Hearts is good on exactly turn 2. There will be niche situations against anything that's got a lot of characters with only 2 or 3 strength. So you're looking at Steel Song, things like that. Then maybe later than turn 2 you can get value from this Queen of Hearts, but really the dream, right, is you play it on 2 and then you're able to crab, take something out. But the long-term dream is get a 2-for-1 out of this Queen of Hearts, right? And not only that, if you put the damage on her and boost her up to 4, then that makes it a little harder for the Steel Song players to get a Rapunzel trap off on you, because quite often the Lawrence is really important for the Steel Song players to get that Rapunzel trap, or the Daisy going into one of your characters with 3 strength.
The list that I'm playing, that I was kind of grinding with, I actually went on a 16-game winning streak with it, and I don't play any of the bounce package. I don't play Rabbit. People, like I said, people just need to explore different routes and avenues, or whatever you want to call them, to deck building. And I think people will start to find that there's actually really good cards in this game that people are just sleeping on.
Okay, so with most Ruby Amethyst players being pretty down on the card reveals for the past few sets, what would you like to see for the Reign of Jafar, the next set? Would you simply like some faster questers, some bigger bodies, more bounce package support? What would you like to see for Ruby Amethyst to get in the next set?
I think we just need a good like shift line. I think that's what it is. Like, because we have the Sisu and we have the big Sisu, but if you think about it, if we can get an efficient shift line into, Sing B prep, that doesn't feel redundant because we have the Sisu, but it feels redundant. Like if I'm shifting a big Sisu to Sing B prep, then that just looks like the most desperate play of all time. And I feel like I'm wasting like 2 B preps just to Sing one. If our B prep is just always turn 7, then it always gives our opponent like a timing out where they can kind of just hold a Pete, hold a Ursula, hold these certain cards to go, well, this is the only time that you actually ever play this card, on curve. So I'm just going to completely halt it. Whereas if you have that shift line, you kind of get that, sneak attack ability, or ability to kind of reset earlier, if we're dealing with like these very aggressive strategies. So that's always kind of what I've hoped for, is just an efficient shift line.
So selfishly, it's item removal, right? Because that is one of the only things that I feel like Ruby Amethyst, like it's the dime specifically, right? And in the future, you've got to think there's going to be other like problem items that we're going to want to get rid of. It's very clear that they are making Amethyst's way of touching items be to bounce it to the hand. So I imagine that's going to continue, but at least if we could have the ability to bounce, because at the moment it's only like 3 cost items that we can do. There's the Maleficent, the Floodborn one, who on play, you, according to how many Maleficents you have in play, you bounce characters, locations, or items of 3 strength or less back to hand. Something that isn't awful to play, that can allow us to interact with items a little bit, even if we're not allowed to banish them, to bounce back to hand something that's a bit more expensive. But like also don't then put that on a 5 cost uninkable action, which just says return a item of any cost to the player. Like at least put it on a body or something.
Just inkable good cards, probably no. If we get item removal, that'll be cool. I highly doubt it though. But even with like item removal now with Tamatoa, they just get the items back. So I mean, it's tough. Like I know Benja's still a good card, and I mean if we got a card like Benja, that would be kind of cool. I think if we could get like another decent like rush character that is decent, kind of like a cheaper Maui, or even if it's a little bit expensive, but it has a bigger body, just another rush threat. Because like when you play against red purple, the only threats you play around for rush is Fox and Maui. So if we added another like meta relevant rush character, it would make people think about their plays on their turn and stuff. I'm telling everyone now, pick up your legendary purple Jafars. Because I mean, when a set is called Reign of Jafar,
there's gonna be.
It's gotta be something good in there for Jafar. No, like I mean, they're just telling us.
Yeah. I secretly feel like they have a 6 cost in every single color, and they're dropping one like each set.
Okay, let's go. But let's talk through it. What are the other ones?
The Maui Shark is like the first one.
Yeah. Okay.
And like these. So we have Maui Shark, and now we have Tamatoa. So, they always kind of, it seems like they create this group of cards, give each one like in a color, here's like this powerful card or this staple, card. They tried to do it with the Chromicons, tried to do it with the coils, but it kind of feels inconsistent there. But maybe that's the reason why they're kind of slow rolling all the 6 drops. This is just a theory. I could be totally wrong.
I love the theory.
I just I just want a card that's like, oh yeah, I can't wait. Like I can't wait to test that.
Yeah,
we didn't get any of that for this set, especially like I mean when they spoiled the 7-drop Donald Duck that it makes it so that you need 25 lore. I was like, that's nothing. Like we always get these cards that are just like cool.
If it had Ward, it might be cool, but
but again, that's not in our color combination.
It sounds a bit selfish as the player playing all the draw engine cards. but I hate Prince John, man. Like I hate discard in general.
Yeah.
But Prince John in particular is just like, and this is more biased, I think, than actual game design flaws. This isn't a genuine. I believe this is a game design flaw. Maybe it is. Maybe Prince John having Ward is a flaw. But there is a lot of bias there. So if we could have, like, we've got the Arna, right, which says the opponent chooses a character to exert, but like. An inkable Arna. That Arna that we've got that makes our opponent exert one of their characters, but on inkable, it would still be bad. It would still be bad and no one would play it. But, like, at least then maybe we can't complain as much.
Yeah.
Because at least then it is inkable, so people could say, all right, well, you're choosing, you have an answer, like, you just don't want to put the card in your deck, which is fair enough.
If you look at all the slots in the deck, like I think the one slot is pretty reasonable. Like basically Amethyst has like all the best like one cost cards. They're all cyclers and like you can use them for many different purposes. I think the 3 slot is still pretty good. You know, historically Fox, I still want to play Fox. It's not like I don't like the card. I think the card is still very versatile, but in this kind of 3/3 format, it's not great. We have Sisu. I think Sisu is like the premier like 3 cost in the game. Like it's the biggest quester plus like the biggest body that you can play on 3 mostly. And then obviously have Genie and Rabbit also premier kind of 4 drops. And I think the main weakness is the two drop slot, right? I think that's like the main thing that a lot of like Ruby Amethyst players are complaining about. Like, if you compare all the two drops in the game, like Steel has like Calhoun, Smee, and we have like Flynn and Queen of Hearts. So I would like to see some kind of like bigger body in the 2 drop slot that just doesn't get stormed away. Like, yeah, we got Raja, but Raja also gets stormed away.
Yeah.
Right? So I think, yeah, we're definitely in this format where it's like, I want to be able to contest Bell if, Sapphire Steel opens Bell. I think that's like the main thing I want to see. I think in terms of the ladies are good enough, I think. But I would also like to see some kind of like red-purple card that has like both a banish and like a draw effect, or at least like a gain lore and banish effect. I think that's like totally reasonable. Not too like insane. Maybe make it like a 7 cost like uninkable or something, and I think it'll still see like a lot of play because that's what the deck likes to do, right? Like you want to play as like a value type of engine, being able to do like multiple things. So I think if those 2 things happen, like having a really good 2 cost, maybe a good like 7 cost like enter the field style effect, I think Ruby Amethyst will definitely be one of the premier decks of the format.
Yeah, those were all the questions I had. I really appreciate you hopping on. Do you want to shout out anyone? Tell us where we can find you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. I've seen you cast a lot, and I'm a big fan. I love what you're doing. Do please keep it up, and thanks for having me on. It's like you said, being a caster and like being kind of known as like one of the more like entertainment based streamers. You often get asked about those sort of things, which is great. I'm always happy to, but it's great to be able to just like talk about the game in itself because that is something that is. I'm super passionate about it. I'm super competitive. I'm putting my all into being the best player that I can be, not only to hopefully make me a better caster, but I have the exact same dreams of one day being up there on the main stage playing the best players in the world. So yeah, it's always great to get to talk about it. Ruby Amethyst is not dead in my opinion by any means, especially considering the amount of red, blue, and blue steel decks that aren't even playing the dime. Like, honestly, if I know that you're dimeless Sapphire, then I feel favored of the vast majority of the time. Maybe that's overconfidence, but I think sometimes you've got to be a little overconfident, right? But also, to be noted, I'm always going to stick with Ruby Amethyst. I didn't play it because it was the best deck. I played it because it speaks to me. It's got so many cards in it I like. So, yeah, Ruby Amethyst stands, unite. But other than that, yeah, you can find me over on Lorcana Villain on YouTube. Content hasn't been as regular as I would have liked the last month or 2. I've had a lot of personal stuff going on, but there's lots of projects going on in the background. I'm super excited for Lorcana D&D, which is going to be coming this year. Which is a passion project of mine that I've been working on for some time. And then, yeah, just more top 8 deck lists and hopefully more casting.
Yeah, so main plugs is just my usual. So my Twitter and my Twitter and my YouTube. You might find that those are rebranded, and we'll get into that at some point. But yeah, so now it's under Never Taris, or it's still Yeah, Never Taris on both Twitter and YouTube. That's NVR and then Taris, Taris. So those are the main socials that I use for Lorcana. But yeah, keep on the lookout. There's a really cool project that me and some other Florida people and maybe outside of Florida people are working on that is going to be pretty sick for the community. So keep a lookout for that.
Shout out to the masters, or the council of Red Purple, Ed, Taris, Kendo. Even though he's playing Purple Steel, I see lately he's abandoned us, but he's still one of the OGs. And then Arathian, Warp, um, and just like the whole community of Red Purple. Ever since we made that burn video, I love the support that we always get asked questions if the deck's back or whatever. You never know if the meta shifts away and people forget about the deck. It can always pop back up like it did for Seattle. Shout out to the team, the homies, everybody on the team. We got two of our members. We got Hamza and Diego, level 9001. They're going to Worlds. Both of them qualified for Worlds. So hopefully we get more information about that. But we're gonna be in the lab. We're gonna be testing for them. Hopefully we come up with this crazy deck. And one of Luxury Gaming is holding up that World Championship trophy.
Shout outs to my team, Team Tianhu. They help me practice all the time, and also SLTC also helps me practice all the time. And yeah, I'm excited for like the next season.
Okay, so that is the state of Ruby Amethyst according to 4 of the most prominent Ruby Amethyst players in Lorcana. How do you feel about the deck after the discussion? Do you feel better about it? Do you think Ruby Amethyst is on its way back, or is it all just a dream? Let me know down in the comments. Also, I know it's been quite a while since my last video essay where I broke down the complete history of Bucky. I am working on a new one. It's taking a long time. I'm trying to get everything together, but to give you a little bit of a hint, a taste at what that might be, we are going to be talking about Sapphire Steel. We are going to be going through the entire history of the deck. I'm going to be talking about how the deck came to be, how the deck has performed traditionally, and how we got here, where it's like the best deck in the game. I'm going to be talking to some of the most prominent players, but it's not going to be an interview style type video like this one. It's going to be a traditional video essay. There's going to be a ton of history. We're going to talk about early tournaments. It's going to be great. I hope you all really like it. I've been working on it for a long time. So thank you for your patience on that. And yeah, hopefully when it comes out, you're able to enjoy it. But that is going to be it for me. Thank you for joining me in my Lorcana lair, and I will see you in the next one.